Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Inshallah, today we're going to go through the characteristics of letters that do not have opposites to them. If you look at the table that I have on my screen, I have identified the categories and we'll go through them individually. The first category is lean, which means softness. And this consists of two letters, the ya and the waw. Then we will speak about the fashi, which applies only to the letter sheen. We have then qalqala, which we will look at the last category in a separate video. So we'll make a separate video for qalqala. Then we'll go on and move on to safir, which consists of three letters, the sa, then sin and zai. We have taqreer, which applies only to the letter ra. We have inhiraf, which is drifting, and that applies to letters lam and ra. And then we have istitala, which applies to dhal. So let us look at the first category of lean. Harf lean basically means easiness. So it's easy to emanating the letter from its articulation point with ease and without any effort from the tongue. There are two letters of lean, which is ya and waw. Ya and waw, and they're not very clear here, but you can see in my table that I've created that there's a ya and a waw. They are preceded by a fatha. So if you see in these examples below, there are the letters of lean, ya, waw, and ya. There's no alif here. And they are preceded by a fatha. Each one of them is preceded by a fatha. And the harf lean always has a sukun on it. Always has a sukun. They are not lengthened, so they are not mud letters. We do not lengthen them for two counts. So Quraysh, Khawf, Al-Bayt. Okay, but I'm not going to say Quraysh, Khawf. Okay, it's Khawf, Al-Bayt. We then have inhiraf, which is drifting, and it's applied to the letters of lam and ra. And this is because they drift away from their articulation point. They move away, turning from its path. Okay, so the running caused by the tongue moves these letters away from the articulation point. So they deviate and they move. That is what inhiraf is called. The fashi, as I said, it applies only to the letter sheen. And it basically means spreading the sound of the letter in your mouth. The letter of sheen, the sound spreads in your mouth. It collides with the inner palate of the upper and lower teeth. So if we say sh, we don't want to overemphasize it. So we don't want to say sh, that's overemphasizing. But when we say sha, she, shu, sha, she, shu. Again, it's a soft letter, so sha, she, shu. And that's enough, the fashi. Sha, she, shu. We shouldn't emphasize it too much, sha, so not pressing too much for the fashi. Then we have the whistle, which is a safir. And a safir, as we said, applies to three letters, sad, sin, and zai. And basically, it's a whistling letter, a sharpness of sound, okay, and it traversing through a tight passage. So here you have an image, okay, so coming through a tight passage. It should not be articulated with your tongue being pressed against the palate or the teeth or your tongue, okay. There should be a small space between the tongue and the palate, and then the whistle will be able to emanate easily. These letters aren't strong, so you shouldn't be pushing them. And how we make a whistle: so, si, so, si, su, sa, si, su, za, zi, zu. So there's almost like a hissing or a whistling sound with them, a natural whistling sound. So, si, su, sa, si, su, sorry. So, si, su, za, zi, zu. And you can hear the safir in those letters. Repetition, at-taqreer, it applies only to the ra. and it's the trilling of the tongue when pronouncing the letter Ra, and due to its tight articulation point. There's one very important point here. The reciter should be careful not to exaggerate the repetition, and a lot of readers do that. A lot of readers are repeating the taqreer in the Ra. So if I say Ar-Rahman, Ar, and it's natural taqreer. It already has taqreer. But if I say Ar-Rah, even if it's shadda, Ar-Rah, this is incorrect. Even with shadda, we can say Ar-Rahman. If I say Ar-Rah, this is incorrect because I'm exaggerating the repetition in the Ra. We've already spoken about inhiraf, which is the deviation or drifting from the makharij. So here it's talking particularly about the Ra, and it says that it sticks at the left or right of the very tip of the second part of the articulation point, meaning the gum. So it moves away from the tip of your tongue. Again, it's like the lam. So we call it drifting. So it drifts. So you have some images here where it shows you that it drifts out from its path like the lamb. Elongation, istitola, is basically the lengthening of the sound. So if we have here bod, if we say bo, bu, bu, we hear it almost, the sound is lengthened, and it's not like the mud, but it continues. The sound continues for a while, like when we're saying the sound of bo, okay, so it continues. But if we say dal, the small dal, not the bod, the dal, it'll be like da-di-do. The sound is not continuing, it's not lengthened, there's no elongation in dal, da-di-do. But when we say bo-di-do, there's elongation, there's a length to that sound, meaning it continues, it's lengthened, we make it run. We should be careful not to make the dod sound like the dal, which a lot of people do. Okay, so when you're saying the dod, you need to make sure there is a heavy taqfim sound for it, tafkhim, and it's not like the dal. And the dod should be lengthened, because it's also the characteristic of Rakhawa. We said some letters you do not take long in pronouncing them. So the letters of shidda, you can say them quickly, like ja, qa. But the letters of Rakhawa, they need time. They need more time to say them. So you shouldn't say da, da. If I say da, that's too quick. Da, wala dalin, okay? Or because the dal is the one that has the shortest amount of time when we pronounce it, inshallah. Inshallah, jazakallah for watching. We're going to go through Qalqala next video. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.